So in a previous video, I discussed my ideas for how to adapt the first book of the Stormlight Archive, The Way of Kings, into a season of live-action TV. And since people seem to enjoy that, I thought I'd give the same treatment to the Dark Tower series, which, as I've previously stated, I consider to be one of my favorite book series of all time. Of course, it's important to note that the Dark Tower series is different from the Stormlight Archive in the fact that there have been attempts made at bringing the series to live action before. Most notably, the 2017 feature film The Dark Tower, which was universally panned by critics and audiences alike, and the lesser-known Amazon series, which was canned after the pilot. That pilot has never been released to the public, although images from it look pretty amazing, and people who claim to have seen it reviewed it positively. However, it apparently wasn't on par with Amazon's other fantasy prospects, The Wheel of Time and The Rings of Power. The miniseries would have focused on the fourth book in the series, which tells a prequel story filling out the main character Roland's backstory, which I maintain would have made for a perfect season of TV. But whatever, bygones. The good news regarding Dark Tower adaptations is that director Mike Flanagan has expressed his resolve to deliver a Dark Tower series, Flanagan being best known for his other King adaptations, as well as his Netflix original horror series, of which I am a connoisseur. Still, as of now, no studio has greenlit the project, which is honestly fair considering how the movie performed. With Flanagan's relationship to King's material and his filmmaking prowess, there couldn't really be a better pick for adapting this material. Besides me, of course, which is why I'm making this video, drawing from knowledge garnered through my bachelor's in film.
This is worthless.
Flanagan, if you're watching, take notes. So, one of the most important things to consider when it comes to adapting the Dark Tower would be structure. The books in the Dark Tower series vary widely in length, with some covering longer periods of time than others. Suffice to say, adapting the Dark Tower would not be as simple an equation as one book equals one season of TV. This is a hurdle which previous adaptations have stumbled over, with the movie being a sort of adaptation of Book 1, but with elements from books 5 through 7 thrown in, while mostly skipping books 2 and 3, which are generally people's favorites. As I previously stated, I think the show had a more enlightened approach, choosing to focus solely on the more self-contained prequel story, as they were initially aiming not to compete with the movie's continuity. Although, by the time of shooting, that obviously was not a concern. Still, I think if you're starting from scratch, using the prequel as a jumping off point wouldn't be the best idea, since you'd essentially have to transition to a whole new story arc once that arc was over, with pretty much none of the characters returning except Roland and the Man in Black. So I would propose starting with the events of the first book, The Gunslinger. Like with my Way of Kings video, I'm going to be focusing on a hypothetical first season, with the goal of winning over the imaginary execs so they will greenlight more. So how do you structure season 1 of The Dark Tower? I actually think the answer is very simple. I would propose 6 to 8 hour-long episodes, with the first 2 episodes serving as a 2-part pilot covering the events of The Gunslinger, and the final 4 to 6 episodes covering the events of Book 2, The Drawing of the Three. Now, you might say that 2 episodes wouldn't be enough to cover the events of Book 1, but you have to remember these would be an hour long each, the equivalent length of a feature film put together, and Book 1 is fairly short. The first episode could cover the events in Tull, using the action there to hook viewers in and maybe ending with Roland encountering Jake, while the second could cover Roland's evolving relationship with Jake, sprinkling in flashbacks to his life in Gilead and duel with Court, and ending with Roland's palaver with the Man in Black. If done well, I think these episodes could hook people in while still leaving them wanting more. Still, maybe the most obvious reason to do this is that people often favor Book 2 to Book 1, as it introduces 2 of the series' most important characters, Susanna Holmes and Eddie Dean. As well, you have to take into account the practical concern of having series regulars, that lead actors often have it in their contracts that they appear in the majority of episodes in a given season of TV. And this way, using some cross-cutting and maybe some flashbacks, you could ensure that Jake, Eddie, and Susanna all appear in all or most of the episodes. I just think as a baseline, this structure would make the most sense. Book 1 alone, I think, would make for a pretty poorly paced and uneventful season of TV, and yet it is vitally important that those plot points are still utilized. Book 2 is what hooks most people, and this way you could end with all the main characters properly introduced. Now, if I had to label these episodes, gun to my head, they would probably go Episode 1, The Gunslinger, Episode 2, The Man in Black, Episode 3, The Beach, Episode 4, The Prisoner, Episode 5, The Lady of Shadows, Episode 6, The Pusher. You know, gun to my head, I haven't thought too much about this, but what about style? How would the show look and feel? One thing that I made a point of in my previous Dark Tower video is that the Dark Tower is weird. Like, really weird. How could such an eclectic story work as a TV show aimed at modern audiences? I think the most important thing here is to lean in to the weirdness. Shows like Adventure Time, HBO's Watchmen, and From all prove that audiences don't mind weirdness as long as it's over the top enough to be consistently entertaining. I think the movie is a pretty perfect example of what not to do. Trying to centralize the mythology and simplify things to be more easily digestible. At the heart of the Dark Tower is a very simple, effective through line. It is the story of a guy who is trying to get to a tower. You do not get much more straightforward than that. The fun of the series is all of the weird, macabre, horny twists and turns along the way, with the simple explanation that reality itself is coming undone and genres are fusing together. The goal should be to give audiences shocking moments that they'll never forget, while maintaining King's iron vice grip on character complexity and suspense. Make people love the characters. That's all you have to do, and it could not be a simpler task. Unlike a story like, say, Dune, where liberties had to be taken with the source material to make the characters more emotive and, character-y to appeal to modern audiences, the characters in the Dark Tower are brimming with life and inner conflict from minute one to minute done. Their strained relationships make for irresistible drama as they struggle to cooperate as a team while navigating a nonsensical fever dream world. As for visual style, the same principles hold true. I mean, for God's sake, get experimental with it. The last thing the Dark Tower needs is to look like some desaturated, copy-pasted, color-grade corporate product. Personally, I've always envisioned the Dark Tower as having a crunchy 35mm look, with a visual style fusing the Dollars trilogy with the grimy 80s horror look of Evil Dead. Sort of like that grimdark fantasy AI art people like so much, but good. Another important thing to bring up is period. In the movie, all of the scenes that take place on Earth in New York were changed to be set in the modern day, while in the books, they're set in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. While I understand that period production design is expensive, and other King adaptations have successfully made the jump to modern time periods, I do think that the Dark Tower loses something fundamental with this change. Like, Eddie is such a quintessential 80s New Yorker, and the period trappings really give the story a sense of place, depicting King's world when he was at the height of his popularity and influence. It's part of what makes the series feel so King. While I could understand them changing this for budgetary reasons and to appeal to a modern audience, I just think it would be a shame, personally. But what about casting? I told myself I wouldn't include this section in these videos on account of fan casts being generally myopic and repetitive, but because you're asking, here it is, my definitive fan cast for The Dark Tower. Tom Holland as Eddie, Zendaya as Susanna Holmes, Minecraft Kid as Jake, Giancarlo Esposito as the Man in Black, Josh Gad as Oi, Ryan Reynolds as Blaine the Mono, Dwayne The Rock Johnson as Roland. Alright, now that that's out of the way, who would actually play Roland? I'm not going to be giving any definitive pick, just throwing out ideas here. I honestly think Idris Elba wasn't a poor choice. He definitely got the gruff, stoic demeanor down pretty well. But let's just assume he's off the table on account of the movie. The obvious choice back in the day would have been Clint Eastwood, as his Western-type character served as the inspiration for Roland, with art of the character often bearing a not-so-subtle resemblance to the actor. But he's old and racist, so I wouldn't consider him. There's his son, who's a little young, and I don't know why, but I get a weird serial killer vibe from him, but he's a possibility. Timothy Oliphant would probably make a good choice, as, like Eastwood, he's made a career out of playing cowboy types and is of the appropriate age. People have thrown out Nikolaj Coster-Waldau and slap him in a cowboy hat, and I could almost see it. Jake and Susanna, I honestly don't know. Jake, you would need a very talented child actor. Susanna, you would need an actress who could pull off the different sides of her multiple personality issue. Obviously, Lupita Nyong'o would be a great choice, but she seems too famous to do TV. This would be amazing though. For a long time, people have obsessed over Aaron Paul playing Eddie, which, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I mean, besides playing a heroin addict at one point, I just don't think he has Eddie's chipper affect or good looks. Some have suggested Joe Quinn, but the obvious choice is, me. Yeah, I can do a fake New York accent. Hey, I'm walking here. Empire State Building. Like and subscribe. I can't come up with the outro. Bye.